So welcome everyone. I'd like to convene the meeting and then you folks can have your lunch before we begin with the speaker, but thank you very much for coming. I'd like to convene the 5,658th meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago. And for those of you who are guests, we usually begin our meeting with a thought for the day, and Shada Calderwood, one of our members, is up for the thought of the day.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to read. This is my first thought of the day in Rotary. So thank you, Pancho, for giving me the opportunity. I would like to quickly talk about the small act of kindness that can have a big impact on the world around us. Priest Saint Vincent de Paul believed in the power of charity and helping those in need. However, we don't need to undertake grand gestures to make a positive impact. Even small act of kindness like holding the door open for someone or offering a kind word to a stranger can brighten someone's day. By showing compassion of empathy towards others, we can make the world a better place one small act at a time. So let us strive to be a source of kindness and the light in the world and make the differences in the lives of those around us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shada. So please enjoy your lunch, and we'll begin the program in a few minutes. So again, welcome to our meeting. Is Alita here? Alita, would you come up and just tell us a little bit about where we stand with Job 1, and then I will introduce the speaker.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm Alita Williams, President-elect of Rotary One, and we have our wonderful Job One program this Saturday here at the Union League Club at 9 a.m. We are having our second day of training with our students, and we need some wonderful Rotarians to come out and help us do resume reviews with our students. And to bribe you even more, I will buy you breakfast. So if anyone is interested and available to come, please do. It's part of our training with them to make sure that they have professional and job-ready resumes for our job fair. So we ask for you to come out, and then the next date is May 9th. We'll be doing mock interviews with the students. So if you're interested in that, that will also be here at the Union League Club. Thank you.
So I have the great pleasure to introduce Robert Manuel, who is the 13th president of DePaul University here in town. We're very thankful that you can be with us. The appointment of Robert Manuel as the 13th president was announced on May 10th, 2022. Rob brings more than 30 years of academic experience in higher education to DePaul. He most recently served as the president of the University of Indianapolis, which is a faith-based institution affiliated with the United Methodist Church. And we've been able to have a nice discussion. As many of you know, I'm also affiliated with the United Methodist Church. Rob has a bachelor's degree in history and political science from Allegheny College, a master's degree in higher education administration from Syracuse University, and a doctorate in higher education administration from New York University. He's served in various positions with Georgetown University and New York University as well. I wanted to end my introduction by telling an anecdote about his installation at his inauguration at DePaul. He told the allegory, or he invoked the allegory of the cows and the buffaloes in addressing the challenges that modern universities face these days. And for those of you who are not familiar with the allegory, the cows are the animals that run from the storm, but the buffaloes are the ones who rush the storm. And he explained that it's the buffaloes that spend less time in the storm because they're the ones who are facing the challenges. And he challenged the DePaul community to be buffaloes. So please give a nice, warm Rotary welcome to Rob Manuel, president of DePaul University.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and meet all of you and talk with you all for a little bit. I want to start with an apology, which is I was riding up in the elevator with two Rotarians, and one of them said they read this book, which was very academic, had a lot of data in it. And so I went back and I took all the data out of my slides so this would be more of a story. We could be connected in that. There is some data, but I think it's important to the story that we're going to tell and the conversation we're going to have. The first, if you could put the first slide up, the second slide up. This is the state of higher education. So higher education right now, as many of you will know, just by looking at the news, is under attack in lots of ways. It's under attack from within. It's under attack from without. It's under attack from what role it used to play in the society to what it's playing now. And there's so many different things that are raining and kind of creating this storm cloud for us that it's difficult to know what path forward you should take. Lay on top of that COVID, which came up, as you all know, very, very quickly. And you realize that this washing machine agitator of a society is now starting to redefine or require higher ed to redefine itself. So early on, higher education was there to be in place of parents. It's called in loco parentis. It sent people to schools, and schools would take the place of the parents to raise those children. It was about formation and knowledge, both together. And then eventually that pendulum started to swing from being the place where the parental extensions were made to a place where autonomy and individualism occurred over years, decades. But during all of that time and all of that switch, higher education was always seen as a societal good, meaning if you got your education, you were going to make society better. Nowadays, it's seen more as an individual good, meaning you go get your degree and you benefit from that because you get a higher salary, you get a better job, things that you learn accrue to your career. That shift is damning for higher education. And I'll share with you a little bit of numbers there in a minute. But if you look at these storm clouds that are gathering over higher education in this image, which you probably can't read because it's a little bit of an eye chart here, is that there is financial instability that's occurring. There are fewer numbers of students that are willing to go to college. There are fewer number of those students who can afford to go to college. There are higher and higher amounts of discount rates that are being paid to help students attend college, which then takes away from revenue that can be applied to spend on the education. And so if you have fewer students bringing fewer dollars, you have less money to invest in the educational programs that you have. And that creates this pressure in higher education to go after the shiny object, which is find the degree or the program or the quick win to generate revenue to cover the costs that you have to continue to go and grow. And that's damning for higher ed because we lose the mission. We lose the thing that made us unique. Now, you had a quote from St. Vincent de Paul to start the presentation. Our whole entire educational motto and kind of charisms are built on St. Vincent de Paul. To do that, you have to do more than just educate the mind. Students have to come to us and engage in the charisms of caring for others. Engage in the charism that says There are people out there that are marginalized, and but for the experience of people who want to help, would not have quality of life that they would otherwise. There's nothing more that can point to a societal good more than the core mission of what DePaul does and what many other institutions do around the world. We have to keep that going, and that mission requires money, requires dollars, requires a financial infrastructure that makes sense. And yet, because higher education has moved into this individual good mentality, the federal support for that has waxed and waned a little bit. It has only recently that the Pell Grant, which is for those who are most needy, was increased a little bit. It's only most recently that the loan limits were increased for students to go to school. And it's only recently, and probably only in Illinois, where the MAP funding, the state funding, was increased as well. These are few votes of confidence that going to school generates a societal return where government entities should inform. The opposite side of that argument, of course, is that we don't deserve that money. And you pick your side based on whether you think your community is going to get better, the society is going to get better, or whether that individual is going to get better. That moment is really wrapped up in what you see in these rain clouds here. The political and public distrust of higher education is growing. We're being called to be more accountable, which is not a bad thing. We should be proving our worth. But we're being questioned, much like K through 12 education is, about the process we go through to do it. You can see this in states where governments are starting to take over curriculum. They're starting to decide what books could be put in their institutions. And you can see this in places like the for-profit colleges and universities, which have less compliance and regulation because they exist in the business side versus in the academic side. And so their accrediting resources are different. And in the end, though, everything that's considered higher education gets wrapped up into the brand of what we are, and we end up all getting muddied and dirtied as a result. Competition is growing, and I don't mean new colleges. I mean corporations that have decided that they can train and educate their own people to bring them into their own places of business, and that the role of liberal arts has been completely tossed aside. So you see all of this kind of converging at the moment in higher education. That's a crisis. This is going on for 5 or 6 years. You slap on top of that COVID, where we can't be in community with each other, and you can see the relative isolation and anxiety and kind of process of what happens to higher education at that moment. I'm convinced, however, that right now and for the next year, there's going to be an awakening. There's going to be a moment where higher education, some institutions, will be able to raise their hand and say, this is the path forward we're taking. This is why. This is what it's tied to in terms of our mission. And if they can do that and create value, they will become the new quality indicators of higher ed in the country. So if I asked you to name the top 5 institutions in the country, who would you say are the top 5? You can't say your alma mater if you went to Michigan or something, but who would you say are the top institutions in the country? Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, DePaul. Very good. No, I'm just kidding. But if you think of those institutions, every place I go and I ask that question, it's the same institutions. And higher education acts like a snake in lots of ways. Whatever the head does, the body wants to follow. And so if Harvard, Yale, Princeton go do something, everybody assumes that's quality. And then we try to replicate that. When in fact, right now, the moment to design our path going forward is so unique, so powerful, that you're going to see different models emerge. And I think the very traditional model will be there because they have dollars forever to fund it. Everybody else will be looking to design what makes them of value to the community they serve. And that's where the new concept of higher education quality is going to come from. And so I took this job 8 months ago because I looked at the capacities of DePaul, what the faculty are doing, to create new knowledge, what the faculty are doing with the students to connect them to that new knowledge, and specifically what we do for the community, the quality of life in the community, and realize that if we could design that in the right way, we could in fact be the answer to what the new national standard for quality in higher education is. We have resources. We are fortunate to have 23,000 students, to have an endowment of close to $1 billion, and to be able to have an alumni population that wants to invest back into the university. That is a fortunate place to be. It's a privileged place to be. And it also is the driver behind what we can accomplish over the next couple of years to become that standard of higher education. Could I get the next slide? I'll share with you, this is the example and proof of this devaluing of higher education. If you look at the dark blue is the people that question the value of higher education, and the light blue are the people that think it's necessary to succeed, right? And so you can see, what you can't see, is that 51% of the population now think higher education is obsolete. 49% think it's valuable. That used to be 70-30 to the favor of higher ed. If you look just at Democrats and Republicans, you can see an even further split. The 40% of Democrats believe that it's limiting to life. It's not necessary. 60% believe it's incredibly, it's required in order to get to where you want to go. Whereas with Republicans, its split is 59-41. Not to take a side politically, controlled from. This is where the resources to support higher education come from, and not just in tuition help, but also in funding for research, ideation, creation of intellectual property, thinking about how you can commercialize that and bring that forward. And if you think there's not a connection between higher education and advances in our world, you can thank MIT and their media for the creation of all the flat screens in this world that happened inside of their design media lab. That can happen, and tons of advances happen that way. This problem is that adults between 18 and 34, 70% of them don't believe in higher education as a value anymore. Percent do. Right? And it's going to make sense because the next question I'm going to ask you is it worth it? How much does it cost to go to higher education? We'll get to that in a second. The problem with this is that the conversation has been either or. It's been, do we do vocational education or do we do higher education, right? That workforce development versus education in liberal arts and applied traditions. If you look at regional economies that have failed, and I'll take Anderson, Indiana as an example, they have been so focused on the immediate that they lost how to be relevant and stable in the future. So they were a car company. GM was in Anderson, Indiana. All of the jobs, union and otherwise, were tied into the production of cars in that place. The wraparound services, consultancies, creation of physical pieces that would go into the cars were all in that industry, and it was booming. And Indiana's policies then said, let's look at how we support the workforce needs of that company, and completely abrogated, in my mind, their responsibility to say, how do we also develop a future economy that can help us in case something happens in that economy? Car manufacturer moves out, and Anderson is in bankruptcy at the moment. The people have moved away. The home values have plummeted. The crime has increased. The educational opportunities have decreased. Anderson University is maybe the only thing in that city that's drawing people to that place. The places where you see both and happening are devoted to making sure the companies and the industry have their workforce ready and have ladders to further economic development in different regional ways. The Research Triangle in the Carolinas, the 128 corridor around Boston, Silicon Valley, you all know about. Chicago has that moment and that opportunity because we have all of those resources. We have tons of really, really good community colleges. We have tons of really, really good four-year institutions. And we have a desire to kind of economically rebirth ourselves, culturally rebirth ourselves. And I think the connection between those is what makes this go away. But only if colleges stop abrogating their responsibility to defend their value and show you the value. We cost $55,000, $56,000 a year. We better be worth it if you show up. You better get what you're looking for. The constant balance and fight between what the students know they want and what our faculty and staff know they need is where value is created. And that fight argument is happening right now. So higher education is both the problem and the answer at the same time. How many of you hire people? So there was a study done not too long ago that said folks who hire in companies that have variable job opportunities and skill sets, for the most part, want people who are loyal, who can think and reason and write and be logical and work in groups, who are creative, and who can do the task at hand. Well, that's where liberal arts education is at its best. I was a history major, and when I told my parents I was a history major, they rolled their eyes and cried and said, where's my doctor? Where's my doctor? But what they forgot was all of those skills that I learned to communicate and argue and debate and with rigor and are actually developed inside of what everybody considers now to be a very disconnected path forward. On the other side, we need very technically trained people to accommodate that. But if you look at the diversity of academic offerings we have in Chicago alone, our ecosystem can train everything. But we have to value both equally at the same time instead of one over the other in order to get to where we need to be. Could you hit the next? Oh, wait, not yet, not yet. How much do you think the average undergraduate in the US is in debt when they leave? 100 grand, 90,000, 150 average, 85. Can you pop that next slide up? So this is part and parcel the story of getting everything together. So there is individual debt that the student owns, there's debt that the family owns, and then there's different kind of programs and degrees that students go after. So if you want to go to dental school, you're looking at on average $300,000 worth of debt to get through dental school. If you want to go to medical school, you're looking at an average $200,000, and I would suggest that's probably higher in urban settings. MBA, $66,000. I mean, oftentimes by the company, but individuals are taking out this. At the undergraduate level, the individual average is $28,000. What's the average price of a used car? Almost exactly $28,000. Now the parents, the plus loan here is another $28,000. So the family indebtedness is critical. And this varies by area. So DePaul, for example, has a $30 debt average for students that come, and a default rate, people who can't pay that back, of less than 3%. And we help those students as well. So the value, meaning what you get at the end, what you pay in, is seen quantitatively in this equation. If my my, what's it called when you can't repay it? Default rate is like 15 to 20%, then you're not getting a value out of your education, meaning financial value. The problem is that the conversation we had where you said, or, there we go, or adding into this the for-profit institutions, in my estimation, are where the real problem is. You take this degree and they are requiring you to take out loans, not just from the government, which are oftentimes subsidized, but from private lenders where the interest rates are really high. And then your degree doesn't pay back what you need. And they're putting out massive numbers of students into the world with some education and a ton of debt where you don't get any of that payback because you don't have your degree. And then the default rate goes through the roof. So for-profit institutions come into the compliance world through the business side. There's a different set of standards for their operation than the organizations that accredit higher education. And to give you a sense of how complex it is, last year alone, we put together 333 unique reports, all from the same data, for different agencies that wanted to judge whether or not we were quality. So there's issues with this. Let me ask you to go to the next slide, please. So here's our path forward. This is DePaul's moment to design itself. We have about a year, and in the end, my vision is to have the university be the model for higher education. I told my board this, and they said, Rob, there is a fine line between a vision and a hallucination. And we're gonna try our hardest to be in the vision side of this. Could you go to the next slide? And the next slide. That was just a pretty picture. So I told you that grounding yourself in a mission is critical. Knowing who you're serving and what you're trying to produce is critical to having differentiation and being good at what you can do. I could, for example, make money by selling hats. I could, for example, make money by putting programs online and going all over the world. What I want to do is be good at the programs that we have tied to the Vincentian mission that we honor for the students who can be with us and want to have that kind of outcome in their lives. And so this is a question of finding the fit, not finding the money. There are some institutions who don't have that luxury, who have to worry about where the dollars are coming from to stay in business. And you can see institutions closing. Cardinal Stritch just closed recently. St. Joseph's in Indiana closed not too long ago. You're going to see institutions of 2,000 or 3,000 students beginning to close with more regularity, not because they weren't good, but because they haven't differentiated themselves to the market to give somebody the reason to want to pay for the kind of education that they're getting. So this distinction is critical, and these 7 things around the circle are what we are using as our distinction. The 2 I want to talk about today are the distinctiveness of the university and the institutional relevance. What makes those things happen? Could you pop up the next slide? And then the next one. So for us, for DePaul, we need to move from disciplinary excellence, really great history professors, really great computer scientists, really great filmmakers, to interdisciplinary approaches, where all 3 of those, the history, the political science, and the comp sci, and the film, all 4 of them get together and start to tackle questions of our day that are critical to our quality of life in our community. Moving from just good for me to good for us, tied to our mission of St. Vincent de Paul, working with people, not for them, just for them. So the 3 kinds of interdisciplinary that happen. There's in your own head. You can sit there and think, boy, I'm interested in studying history, and I also want to study the environment. That's one person in your own head studying that. Then there's person to person. So I want to study history. Marshall is an IP attorney. We want to get together and study the law of something historical, and we produce materials and research, and students get excited. But the real interdisciplinary approach that we're looking for is institution to institution, because the power, the longevity, the institutional memory is formed when DePaul creates a contract and relationship with Discover to go after an understanding of what happens to the community around where they put their call center. So now we're talking about theoretical connections, institutional connections, and societal impacts all together. Could you pop that next slide up? The way we're going to do this is through three main focal points of interdisciplinary connection that are tied to mission. One is engagement of poverty. Two is engagement of environmental sustainability. And three is engagement of the questions about human-computer interaction. So with that last one, you can think of not whether we can build something, but whether we should build something, and the effect that has on our people, on our communities. Well, what this slide is basically just showing you all of the pieces of the university and the community coming in together into a single place to engage these questions. And here's how I imagine we do this. We have the 5th top ranked program in computer science and data analytics in the world right now. It is phenomenal. They can predict an awful lot of things that actually matter to the questions of our society today. Right now, they're used to predict technical things, but not life chances or socially constructed things. We want to move that into having this ability to understand the effect on poverty, environmental sustainability, human-computer interaction when we bring our teams together. So I would love, for example, once we build these interdisciplinary centers on poverty, environmental sustainability, and human interaction, is to bring in the community members, to bring in the industry, to bring in the elected officials, to bring in anybody who's affected by this, to start engaging in questions and asking the questions of this interdisciplinary center about what they need to know or what they want to know. What I are those better answers than I have? They might be. What I also want to do then is create that question and problem and model the answer to it in a future way, in a prospective way versus a retrospective way. So for example, what happens to crime? What happens to education rates? What happens to use of medical systems if a school system is put in a very specific location? We can predict the effect that a school system has or a high school has on the community it serves because we can stitch together behavioral data, literal data, narrative data, and quantifiable data from the state and the federal government and make these predictions over time. If a developer wants to put an 800-story building in the middle of some location, the way you get zoning approval for that is you argue. And usually the one with the most money creates the best pictures, gets the best argument, and then it goes through. What we can do is predict the effect of that building in that space for the residents of that area. And that could be good or bad. We are content agnostic, but we want to be the mediator. So in the country right now, although not so much at Fox right now, but in the country right now, we're basically yelling at each other, right? There's a thought over here and it's coming at you. And we want to model at DePaul civil, rigorous debate based on fact and not allegory. And so these decision theaters, if you can put up the next slide, these decision theaters are a place where we identify and connect the content, the question. If you want to predict something in a community, you have to have historians, you have to have psychologists, you have to have sociologists, you have to understand the context in which you are, the economists, and you need the computer scientists to do this work. Everybody, interdisciplinary, has to come together. And all that data then gets formed by the question that's asked. I thought I was in my big boy voice too. Then in the middle, we build this theater, a room like this with nothing but computer screens around us, where the data is ready to be visualized for people to engage in. And it's user-center built. The questions are user-center built. What happens in the Pilsen neighborhood if? We have all that data, all that information, and then we visualize for everybody what the outcome would be. This is happening only, as I can tell, at Arizona State around water. Their problem is water. What happens if there's a tax increase in water to the communities that are most affected? How do public officials look at that and say, well, maybe we need to tweak where we're headed? This is the engagement that we're looking for. And in doing this, we end up doing what we do really well, which is create knowledge, create the opportunity for convening. We connect students to the problems that they care about most. Students don't think higher education is relevant because we're not connecting to the problems that they want to solve. But we don't want to do that without the rigor of educational discourse, or we've just created more pundits. And we want to pull everybody together to have the effect on our community. I am out of time. I saw that look, Marshall, at the watch. And I thought we were going to leave a little bit of time for questions. I'm happy to answer anything you'd like about DePaul or higher ed, or I can ring the bell and sit down. Your choice.
I did not want to cut you off because I think everyone is totally enthralled, and this is the kind of discussion, the kind of really substantive discussion that we do need to have, and we really appreciate you bringing it here to us. We do have time for a couple questions. Please keep them brief, and one question per person. So Rita has the mic. If anyone has questions, we've got to get.
What steps is DePaul doing to ensure that you have a diverse and inclusive community at DePaul, especially with people trying to fight to take away, the need for schools to balance the race and culture of people that are coming into their institutions?
So the dichotomy is Florida versus DePaul, right? What's happening in Florida is a critical stab at the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. At DePaul, you can look at our numbers to show the outcomes of the interventions and the quests that we have. 24% of our students are Hispanic Latinx. About 19% are African American. And the rest would be kind of, some identify as a mixed origin, some identify as specifically Caucasian. The investments we're making now are in equity, in concept of access. So how do we provide money for folks that need it differently along the way? How do we work with school systems, not just to say, who can you send us, but how can we engage in the programming that happens almost as early as 8th grade, so that the aspiration to go to college in all communities is developed and is created. And whether they come to DePaul is secondary, but we can help that aspiration in that capacity. We're also looking at our curriculum. This focus on poverty, focus on sustainability, and focus on human-computer interaction is a way to engage people of all backgrounds who want to see relevance in their educational background. When we simply say you're going to do history or English or political science, that takes a whole set of populations and makes them uninterested in where we're headed. We also are investing, I think it's $230 million or so in financial aid to help our students afford to be here. We have a ton of wraparound services for our first generation students, which are about 45% of the total population, and Pell eligible students, which is just a little north of that. I also don't think theoretically, like in our hearts, I don't think DePaul could be DePaul without a commitment to that, to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I just think that's part of our mission.
One more question?
Mm-hmm. I missed the last part. What can we do to? Yeah. Yep. So this is going to be kind of an odd answer, but it's we can eject the hubris that we have in ourselves. We believe writ large that if you come through our experience, you're going to be good at whatever you want to do. And for the most part, it plays out. But we have to listen to what the world's saying they need from us and design the two together. For too long, you know that saying, you're in your ivory tower? Well, we got to come out of that. I think we're where we are because the top 50 institutions in this country abrogated their responsibility to defend the value of higher education. And now it's our time to do that. It's everybody else's time to do that. Individually, for their communities, and then the system as a whole will understand that. I think there will be vast differences around the country in terms of long-term effect that these educational policies have. And I fear for places like Florida who aren't able to keep their intellectual talent because that's not a system they want to work in. That's not a system that produces the future-looking, the creative, the new economic realities that are needed. It might only create a need for the existing manufacturing. So I also think we have to not be afraid of the outcomes. We've always said, trust us, it helps. I can, for example, take DePaul's data and say that 40 years after working in the field, you are likely to earn about $1.5 million more than if you didn't get a degree. So we know this works, and we know it's effective. We also need to figure out how to keep people out of debt and manage their connections, because the part of the brand issue right now is we're expensive, we're aloof, and we don't return the promise that we said we were going to return. Well, some of those things are wrong. We need to retell that story. And some of those things we need to change. We need to fix the parts of those stories that need to be changed.
President Rob, thank you so much. Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation and raised a lot of very interesting questions. Before we go, as a token of our appreciation for your time here today, and mug to remind you when you have your morning coffee of your time here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, thank you very much for your time here. When I was preparing for this and giving thought to how to kind of wrap up after the presentation, I do want to share a quote with you, and I think it fits in very well with Rob's theme. Peter Brome, who was the High Chancellor, the Lord High Chancellor of Britain, once said that education makes a people easy to lead, but difficult to drive, easy to govern, but impossible to enslave. And I think Rob's presentation today shows a lot of foresight in kind of reformulating the model and reformulating the vision. So thank you for sharing all that with us today. A couple of quick announcements, but before we do that, I'd like to introduce our guests, and we do have some guests here, so we've got to go through this fairly quickly. Could we have the mic for people? Why don't we start at the president's table? We have, we're going to start with International Rotarians. If you could just briefly introduce yourself, why you're here, and where you're from.
Well, my name is Cyril Noirtin. I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Paris Agora in France, and I'm in town to attend the Business University conferences.
Fantastic. Do we have any other international Rotarians in the room?
If you allow me, I had the pleasure of meeting Cyril last couple of weeks ago in Paris, and he's a fabulous Rotarian and has received the Service Above Self award there's a handful of people that receive that award in the entire Rotary world. So it's an honor to have you with us, Cyril.
Thank you, Margaret, for sharing that.
Thank you, President. I'm Rotarian Yogi from Rotary Bangalore Global Yoga. I'm the founder president. It's a cause-based club to promote yoga for the health and happiness I'm very much happy to be with you today for the flag exchange. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We'll do the flag exchanges after the meeting. Any other international Rotarians? How about domestic Rotarians? Do we have any domestic Rotarians in the room?
Hello, Len Dominguez. I'm with the Little Village Club, and I'm also on the board of directors of our district. Thank you very much. And I'm here to basically to hear President Manuel, because I'm also on advisory committee, Latino advisory committee for DePaul University, where I'm so proud of the education that I got at DePaul way back when. And I'm so glad to hear that the mission really now is which never has changed. I think DePaul has always had an urban mission, which is a beautiful thing to say. I tell people that. And which means to me that they're here to serve the interests of those people, whatever they can afford. I mean, just to say that there's 19% African Americans, think for a minute, that's twice as many percentage as UIC, which is a public university. It costs a lot less. That doesn't happen by chance. So I'm very proud to be associated with DePaul and happy to hear it, President.
Well, Len, I can say from personal experience, having worked with you, that DePaul worked its magic on you, and you're a fine example of a lot of the things that he talked about in terms of working with the community, and so thank you very much for coming. Do we have any other guests? I think, Marga, you have a couple guests who you'd like to introduce.
Yes, I would like to introduce Patricia Vargas Rojas from Cochabamba, Bolivia, and Puente de Solidaridad, and Jody Graal from Solidarity Bridge, based in Evanston. And we are going to be meeting with them after this meeting is over, our lunch meeting, because Patricia and Jody are going to give us an update on the 5 global grants that we did partnering with these organizations in Bolivia. So if you can stay, this is going to be wonderful to hear, because as I said, 5 global grants have been concluded, and we would like to know what is the impact we've had. You're going to say a word?
Thank you. I'm Jody Graal. I work here at the Office of Solidarity Bridge in Evanston. And yes, we've been partnering with you now. We started with one grant, it was about 7 years ago, where we brought a laparoscopic tower to a very important surgical center in Cochabamba, Bolivia. And that went so well that you accepted 5 other grants, which were completed over the last year, which have just made a tremendous impact in just filling some key equipment gaps in 5 different public hospitals. So our focus of our organizations, we work, Patricia is the executive director in Bolivia, and I work in the office here, and our focus is on surgical equipping and training in primarily in Bolivia, and we also have some work in Paraguay.
Thank you very much, and I think Marga is being modest. The effort that we've launched in Bolivia and now internationally through the first 5 Rotary clubs is really quite extraordinary, and Marga was a primary driver of all that. So thank you, Marga, for all you do. Are there other guests in the room?
Yes, Marshall, I have a guest, Ryan Gossett. Ryan is a realtor here in Chicago. I just met him last week because he is selling the condominium right next to mine. So, Ryan, if you'd like to stand up and tell the folks here a little bit about yourself and your interest in Rotary.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Met Ted last week serendipitously. During the pandemic, one of the great things that came out of the pandemic for me is that I bringing more service-based initiatives to bring my sphere of influence together, and doing a lot of volunteer work, and just met this guy and was talking about a lunch he was off to, and I thought the way he described Rotary to me lined up with some values that I'm trying to express to the world. So I thought I'd come and meet you guys, check you out. Thank you.
And you're welcome. You're welcome to come back over at Alita's table.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lilia Meitinger, and I am here representing in Chicago and hosting Rotarian Dr. Jogi Devaraj from Bangalore in for the promotion of yoga for health and happiness. Thank you.
And then I'd like to introduce my guest, one of my partners, Peter Promer. You want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, Pete?
Yeah, thank you, Marshall. So as Marshall said, my name is Peter Promer. I am one of Marshall's colleagues at the law firm Michael Best and Friedrich. I practice in intellectual property law, where I work with companies, small and to household names, helping them build and protect their IP assets. And I am also going to begin serving as the president of the IP Law Association of Chicago, effective next month. It does predate Rotary, I think, by about 30 years. It was founded in 1884, and I will be the 39th president of the organization. And one of our signature events is an annual judges dinner, which the current plan is to have that here at the Union League Club in October. Thank you.
And then why don't we introduce Elizabeth here? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Clements. I'm from DePaul University, and I lead university communications, so media relations and internal communications, and our favorite, crisis communications.
Do we have another guest, Margaret, or is this going to go to Zoom? Do we have any guests? There are no guests on Zoom. Okay.
No, but I would like to make sure you look at the last page in the gyrator today, because on May 1st, Rotary International is going to have a joint event with the Chicago Council of Global Affairs, and the topic, but it's going to take place at Rotary headquarters in Evanston, and the topic is, why is it so needing to help Ukraine at this time? So, and what is the impact of nonprofit organizations in this conflict? And with respect to Ukraine, we learned, Cyril, right, that 300 new members joined Rotary in Ukraine since the start of the war. So there must be something really good going on in Ukraine with Rotary. Oh, the event is free and you can join in person or Zoom.
Thank you very much, Margaret. So the only other announcement I have on my list is our committee meetings. If we could have the committee slide. Shelby, there we go. Our committees meet according to this schedule. You should all feel free to join the meetings. And with that, we have a tradition of closing our meeting by reciting the four-way test. And when I was president, yes. Oh, she does. Okay, I'm sorry, Sarah. Okay, I'm sorry, Sarah. I did not know. It's not on my list, Sarah. I'm so sorry. Go for it. Great, fantastic.
Thanks. Hi, so I am Sarah Buck, the co-chair of the Community Service Committee, and I just want to alert you that we have an event coming. For the guests in the room, the Community Service Committee each year does a CPS grants, and so we have an event for one of our schools coming up. The event is called All Kids Love PE Equally. This is happening on Wednesday, May 31st from 12 till 2. It's at Wilma Rudolph Learning Center. So that is like Washington and Ashland. So during that time, from 1 to 2, you can meet the students and watch the activities with the students using equipment that was funded from Rotary. These are students with special needs. This is a school that specializes in students with special needs. And then you can also meet the physical therapist from 12 to 1. The only thing you'll have to do is sign in at the front desk. So for this particular event, we don't have to do the background check and the volunteer form. We just have to sign in. Unfortunately, I cannot go. So I really hope that at least 1 or 2 Rotarians are free on that May 31st. It'll be in the gyrator within registration link. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for all of the projects that you host. Sarah's done a very good job of having at least one event a month where we get out into the community and we have a volunteer opportunity. So thank you very much, Sarah, for that. So with that, we'd like to bring the meeting to a close. We typically have one of our international Rotarians lead us in the four-way test. So Cyril, if you'd come and join me at the podium, and if everyone would please stand and recite with us the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do as Rotarians.
The four-way test of the thing we think, say or do are: is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it be goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And with that, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you all very much for coming, and come again.